Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is the August All Network Call from the 5-2 Network. My name's Jonathan Wrights. Coming up in just a moment, you will hear from Joel Wetzstein. He is our special guest on this month's All Network Call. He's a part of course, the Worship Arts track coming up at Wiki 14 in just a little over 5 weeks from now, or a little less than 5 weeks from now. We will all convene in Katy, Texas, and dive into what is going on in the 5-2 Network. Of course, Joel, this hour is going to talk with us about how to plan worship services that reach the unchurched. So if you're living in a community where not everyone goes to church,
wow,
this is the hour that is for you. So no pressure or anything, but pay close attention. Of course, we're also joined by Bill Woolsey, the founder and leader of 5-2. Hi, Bill. What is going on in the network that you are getting most excited about this month?
Oh, funny that you should ask, Jonathan. Alas, you know nothing of what's happening right now, I guess.
I know a little.
Two really big things. First of all, what's on everybody's mind here in the home office and throughout all of our locals is Wiki 14. And we have a great lineup for you, but more than that, we have a whole bunch of you showing up to join us. And every year that we've hosted this conference, it truly is like Old Home Week. The excitement, the energy, the vibe, and then add on to that all of the wonderful entrepreneurial, sacramental knowledge, brothers and sisters coming together to learn, to share, and to catch up. It's just a great, great experience. This year we have Ed Stetzer with us. We have John Acuff. We also have just a couple of really fascinating speakers in Ian Crone, Carl Medeiros, Polly Wright will be with us, and in addition, all of our 6 wiki tracks and all of the speakers for that. So I can't say enough. If you haven't signed up yet for the conference, if you're not registered, you need to go and do that today. Bring your team. Believe me, it will be the experience of the year, and you'll really enjoy it. But the other thing that's happening right now is that we are getting ready to unveil a totally new website with lots of materials and resources on it. So we're excited about all that happening as it comes down in the network. And we know that that's going to be a great benefit, a great blessing to those of us around the country and around the world in staying connected to each other in resourcing one another. So a couple of very exciting things happening, and especially, again, that conference, because of the friendships that I've developed throughout the network and how we get to visit with one another, spend some time together here in Katy, Texas.
Yeah, great stuff, Bill. Had breakfast this morning with a couple of guys here in the Cleveland area, both of who bought their plane tickets just in the last couple of days to be a part of Wiki 14 coming up. Now, just out of curiosity, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Bill.
Okay.
What's your favorite wiki moment from previous years? What's the thing you look back on and go, man, this is where, for me, wiki became real?
Oh, wow. I know I'm going to bail on this one. I couldn't tell you that it was just, I really cannot tell you it was just one moment. But I can tell you it was all of the same moment, and it was the conversations, the one-on-ones in a variety of settings, whether it was standing in the hall or it was over a beer at one of the hot spots, the night spots, or maybe it was sitting around on the our back patio with some of our catalysts, our national catalysts. It was always those one-on-one conversations that would not have happened had we not been together in one place. So that's really, I guess, to add on to that one thing, it's all of the thank yous we get. Gosh, I wish I had written down all the thank yous, because those really make up the moment that says the network is doing what it needs to do.
Excellent. That's a great way to encapsulate what the wiki experience is all about. One of the guys I had breakfast with this morning told me that one of the things he's looking forward to is he can't wait for that slightly uncomfortable moment when he's being stretched and challenged by one of the speakers. And I said, well, it'll probably be Bill Woolsey. He said, yeah, you're right. It was Rob Plain that said all this. And that is something he's really looking forward to, that that ever so slightly uncomfortable moment when you get stretched by a speaker who's putting out there what you know you need to hear, and the Spirit is confirming that. So if you haven't registered for Wiki 14 yet, you still have a little less than 5 weeks to get your plans in place. Definitely looking forward to seeing you in Katy, Texas, September 23rd to the 25th for this year's 5.2 wikiConference. All right, let's dive into this month's all-network call. Joel Wetzstein is our guest. Married 17 years, 3 children, currently serving as the Director of Worship and Music at Brookfield Lutheran Church in Brookfield, Wisconsin. I suspect we're going to hear a little bit about Joel's ministry over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. Was on the staff of a number of churches that grew dynamic teams and grew the church to healthy places, including a little place called Crosspoint Community Church in Katy, Texas. Not everyone knows that when Bill Woolsey started Crosspoint 15, 16 years ago, Joel was the original worship leader in that particular congregation. And my, how it has grown since then, starting some of the conversation here. He's also played in the Synodical Worship Band at National Convention. He's been a part of the LCMS National Youth Gathering House Band. And first and foremost, maybe most importantly of it all, he is the kind of guy who knows how to put a worship service together that connects with your community. So now that he's fully embarrassed and turning bright red, let's turn it over to Joel Wetzstein from Brookfield Lutheran. Hi, Joel. Hi, Joel's hand. And are you
nothing to see here?
Are you hiding your embarrassment from us by putting your hand up in front of the camera?
Yeah, I was trying to, but I think it's going to last here a while. So thanks, Jonathan.
You bet.
Are we off and running now?
We are. Hit it.
All right. Well, hey, Jonathan, thank you. Thank you, Bill. It's always good to see you. I say a lot of times when I come back to Crosspoint, it's good to be home. And Crosspoint was the original place way back then, and it's just always a pleasure being a part of that. And now being part of the 5.2 network and all that's happening there, it's just really exciting. I should probably start out with a quick apology to everybody. I'm new to this whole Google Hangout thing, and yesterday I was testing just the whole webcam business, and I found out later in the day that I had sent out maybe countless of invitations to a test Hangout, and I think people got an opportunity to watch the brilliance at work here in my office. My webcam was on, and I didn't even know it, and then hours later I checked my email to see comments like life-changing, transformational. And so I think, actually, Jonathan, back to you. I've said all I need to say. You watched the brilliance at work yesterday, apparently. Seriously, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that was going on. And my wife said, "I hope you weren't picking your nose or anything." I was like, "Golly, So
I really would like you to reenact some of that brilliance for the network right now, if you have something you want to share.
I wish I knew, Jonathan. it just kind of unfolds sometimes.
No problem.
You know, before we start, Jonathan, you didn't mention it, but I've been privileged to be part of the Worship Arts Leadership Institute that has a really strong partnership with 5.2, and I'm gonna pop our logo and the web address up on the screen, and hopefully you guys can see that. It's wallyonline.com, and the Worship Arts Leadership Institute exists to offer empowered learning, common support, and professional inspiration to worship leaders around the country. And I know we're going to be there in Katy in about a month with you guys. So
yes, you are.
Awesome.
All right. So listen, our topic today is planning services that reach unchurched people, and I've always learned by contrast and by knowing not only what we are talking about, but what we're not going to talk about. And so I'm going to tell you right now, this is not how to leverage print and social media to let people know what you're doing. This is not a discipleship seminar that's going to focus on raising up these fully devoted followers of Christ who evangelize their friends. This isn't Halloween Fest, Frisbee Golf, and 57 other ideas to get people onto your campus, although that actually works, by the way. Just ask Bill at Crosspoint. This is not going to be a workshop for your evangelism committee that's going to come up with creepy ways to invite total strangers to your church.
Darn.
I know, right? So now's your chance to tune out if that's what you were looking for. and here's the other thing. I'm not really going to be able to tell you what you should stop doing, because to the viewers and listeners, obviously I have no idea what it is that you're doing at your church. And I know a big key word, and you hear about this all the time in 5.2, is to start something, and to do that now. So we're going to be giving you some plugs of things that you can start. So my family at night, sometimes we like to play Would You Rather. And last night we were playing Would You Rather, and my kids aren't very good at coming up with any of these Would You Rather things. So I came up with one yesterday as I was thinking about this talk, and it was something like, would you rather go to 1 hour of boring church or have your back left molar drilled without Novocaine? And I'm thinking that to a lot of people, they would obviously rather go to boring church, but that's the kind of thing you have to deal with at times, is that for most people, frankly, especially when it comes to unchurched people, there really is no choice at all. And it's not even a hard one. It's an easy choice, because they could be golfing, they could be working in the yard, they could hit the lake, and those are their choices. So is it fun stuff on Sunday morning, the one day a week I get to sleep in, or is it boring church, which is perhaps just like getting your back left molar drilled without Novocaine? So my kids responded saying, yeah, you don't like that, Jonathan. So I almost hate to say this, but I asked my kids, I said, would you rather go to 15 minutes of boring church, or would you rather go to, some hour-long something or other? And they picked the hour-long, something, and thought, they said, Dad, church actually is kind of boring sometimes. And so I don't know how much credibility I'm actually going to have. My kids are at this age where they're trying to figure out, what part of all this is for them? What part of this do they have a choice in? And what is it that our church is doing, in many cases, sometimes working against a long-standing tradition, to make sure that we keep this future generation engaged, of people who already go to church, frankly, let alone reach unchurched people. I went online, and I actually just did a quick YouTube search. I typed in boring church. And be careful, my friends.
Stay thirsty, though. Stay thirsty.
So I found this teenager. I'll leave him unnamed, and he went on and on and on. It was about a 15 to 20-minute rant, and I mean, he was dropping F-bombs. He said, this is so effing boring. He had just come home from church, and this was a kid who actually went to church, but again, it was just saw it as irrelevant and boring. And I mean, one of my favorite comments was, and why do they call them pews? I mean, really? And so here's a guy who we had a chance to reach, and we missed it. And so I've come across some principles and some thoughts that if we're not reaching the teenagers who already go to our church, there's no way we're going to be able to reach unchurched people. It just and that may not be a very scientifically proven kind of a metric, but if teenagers are bored and not interested, then why should somebody who would never even choose or think to be there ever want to show up? I got to thinking about the church word. It's a noun, but somehow we've turned it into a verb where you can be unchurched or de-churched, where one time I was in the church and now it was somehow forcefully or painfully extracted from me. I've been de-churched. I'm a word guy. Stuff like that kind of turns me on a little bit. And then I even came across a naked church. We were joking about this before we went on the air, but I kid you not. This was a church that had naked church. And I'm not suggesting you try that, and I'm not even suggesting that it would work, but it's out there, and it's something that people are trying. Any questions at this point? I would think not, but
well, I'm getting hammered in the questions because this is actually my right molar, and you said that's left molar is the painful component. So people are loving you, but I'm taking a beating because this is my left hand, not this one. So as you were.
All right. Well, thank you. Sorry about that, Jonathan. I still have to do the left and right bit to get my hands straight.
Nice.
So I was recently reading through just some of the ways that people view unchurched people view church, and I saw a statistic, and by the way, like 80% of statistics are made up on the spot, so you can dismiss this one if you want to as well. But it said 74% of the people who don't attend church say they don't because they don't see value in it. It would be like saying, I like hamburgers, but I'm not going to go to McDonald's to get them. I don't want to go. A bunch of people say it's boring and irrelevant. Here's a good one, and one that we're all keenly aware of, being a church full of sinners. I've got enough problems in my life. Why would I go to church and add more? Here's another one I've come across too, and I found this even with my kids in conversation last night. They're not interested so much as to how much something costs, but how long it's going to take. Time is this new economy, and if I'm going to give up an hour of time on a Sunday morning, it needs to count for something. A bunch of people are just saying they're just simply not interested. But here's a good one, and I think it's something we need to maybe consider in our conversation today. I read that only 12% of unchurched people say they don't attend because they don't believe in God. Now, I wonder if we should say maybe believe in a God, because we've got a very specific belief in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There is one God, and for people to say, there's only 12% of unchurched people who don't believe in that God, I think that percentage may be a little skewed. But I read, and I think you guys have heard this before, the best way to get people to come to church is to invite them. And then the question is, what do we do with them once we have them in the building? And so we're going to kick off with that. Okay, so I'm going to use the parable of the sower for a second here, and you may know the parable of the sower. A guy named Jesus, he once told this story, and it goes like this: a sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seeds that fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. You've heard that before, and the thing that really kind of struck me as I was looking through that is that the parable, Jesus himself doesn't say anything at that first reading about using a different kind of seed depending on the demographic of the soil. He doesn't talk about singing a different kind of song while you're throwing the seeds out there in the field. He asks us simply to be faithful in sowing seeds. And I think we could probably take that maybe as a given for this crowd. And so I thought to myself, I was like, then what's the difference? Then what is it that we're supposed to do? And why are we even going to have this conversation if there's no difference between any of the seeds that are ever being thrown out there? You can't polish a seed, you can't sing contemporary seeds or liturgical seeds. The seed is the seed, and you throw it out there. And so it continues in verse 18 in Matthew 13, and it goes like this: hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away. And it continues for a couple more verses there, going through various kind of descriptions of things that happen. And then in verse 23, as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears and the one who understands it. And I think that's where we really have to build our foundation then, because we can be faithful in casting seeds, but if no one hears it, and probably more to the point for us, if no one even understands it when they're there, then they're not actually ever going to be that good soil that can turn that seed into a firmly planted, deeply rooted tree that produces much fruit. And hearing, obviously, it's a lot more than physics. It's blah, 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 blah. You remember from Charlie Brown, wah, wah, wah. People can hear you, but if it's in one ear and out the other, I'm probably not the only one who tunes out conversations I'm not interested. I'm probably not the only one who tunes out or falls asleep in a movie if I think it's boring. That's got to be more than just me. And so we have this challenge then to keep people engaged. And that's the only way that we're going to keep them hearing and understanding. And none of this is going to negate the power of the Holy Spirit. I'm going to say everything, doctrinally sound and everything with that. I'm going to take that kind of stuff for granted as we speak. But as we work to plan a service, as we work to prepare the content for the day, we've got to start by engaging people in the stuff that we're presenting. So here's another thing too. And I was telling Jonathan earlier this week, I'm very much a principle of the matter kind of guy. If I understand philosophies and principles behind stuff, the nitty-gritty stuff on the outside, the things you actually end up doing based on those principles, I think in a way actually that starts to become the easy part. It's when we work from maybe a faulty philosophy or a short misunderstanding or even not being truthful with ourselves about the condition of the way things really are. And one of the things, Jonathan, that you had posted on the website is our worship service, what was it, actually lining up with the mission and the vision of our church? Or are we just going through some routine or ritual on a Sunday morning? Listen, we can have a desire to reach unchurched people, but if it doesn't actually turn into action or a strategy, it's just an intention. And those, there's roads to that other place. There's roads to hell that are paved with good intentions, and we're fighting against the gates of hell. And so we got to stop being, having this intention, or we want to, or we mean to reach unchurched people, but we actually have to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought. And actually, this centers on a question that's coming in here at this point, Joel, asking about how do you line up your worship services with the larger mission of the church? What are some key principles or key practices that might make that a little bit easier? Because you don't know where you're going, any road will do, right?
Yeah. So I mean, to line up an order of a worship service or a service plan with the mission of the church. Again, we're talking to Christian churches right here, to sacramental churches, to a bunch of Lutheran churches. The goal is to create people that are deeply rooted in the faith and the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, we got to remember that I think we take a lot of stuff for granted. We make a lot of assumptions that people come in knowing and understanding why we're doing what we're doing. So if you actually want to turn this now into steps into your service, when you start out at the beginning of a service and you're giving some invocation in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and you mention there's this 3 in 1, right away the math doesn't make sense and you're baffling people, because we're starting with firm beliefs and doctrine rather than beginning a conversation with something that teases people in, that engages their attention. Maybe something that's funny or moving or relevant to their week they've had. I know on our service coming up this Sunday, we're in a series called Been Burned. And last week we talked about being burned by the church. This week we're talking about being burned at work. And next week we're talking about being burned in relationships. And to start the whole thing out, we're playing the Career Builder video, the Super Bowl commercial from 2009. And I tell you, we watched it in our meeting on Monday as we were putting the final touches, and we were just laughing hysterically because it is so stinking true. And at that point, you've got the whole church kind of in the palm of your hand, ready to say whatever you want to say because you've engaged their attention. And that's a first step. If you start out and you've missed that opening window, that opening time spot, that attention grabber, and they've already tuned you out before you ever get started, it's an uphill battle from there. And a lot of people would say that even starts out in the parking lot and on the way in with people. But start out by engaging people. Are you about to ask a question?
Love that. I love the idea of reorienting the beginning of your worship service around engaging a conversation and see where it goes from there. Now, the question that's coming that has come, actually, I'm not sure who this is from. I got texted this, and I don't recognize this number, so I'm sorry I don't know who this question is from. But the question is, this sounds like he's describing a lot of, there's a lot of parallels to the conversation he's describing to beginning a worship service with prayer. where do you see the similarities and the differences if you take that idea of engaging a conversation at the beginning of your worship services?
Well, so a worship service is going to be geared towards bringing people into a place to receive the Word of God and to give thanks to Him for what He's done. That's true of believers. The conversation I'm talking about is and obviously prayer is important, so don't hear this the wrong way, but I'm talking about having a conversation with the people, with the audience, with those who are listening. And if you start out already talking at them instead of creating this thing of, hey, I know the stuff that you deal with during the week, check this out, and everybody's laughing in a way that there is a conversation happening because they're saying, I agree with you. This is my life. I have felt this way before. And then we get into some next steps of engaging people. I don't know if that really answers that specific question or not, Jonathan. You were breaking up while you were reading that to me.
Well, I think the question was all about engaging, and that worked out well. So Joel's going to continue here in a second. If you have questions to him, tweet them using the hashtag 52live, F-I-V-E, the number 2, L-I-V-E, live. Or you can tweet that, or you can also log into the app here on Google Hangouts and send a question in to the conversation, and we'll put that up on the right-hand side of the screen. That's in the Q&A app inside of Google Hangouts. And I just got a direct message from Chris Kopka, former speaker on the All Network Call, wondering if the Holy Spirit had just sent me a text. I don't know, maybe. Might have been. I know the Spirit listens to these All Network Calls. So, Joel, as these questions come up, we'll go back and forth a little bit with more of them as they pop up.
Okay. So I know a lot of what we're looking for here are action steps and start type things. And I'm going to say some of these, and there may be things that you're already doing, and a lot of these are things that I've just been privileged to be a part of for a long time. And so here goes one. When you're planning a worship service, start by including other people in the process. If it's just you sitting behind Planning Center at your desk all by yourself, or if you're the pastor delivering the message and you're sitting in your office, or maybe you're at Starbucks, which is really stepping out, and you're writing your sermon there, if you're not in conversation with people who might see things differently than you learned in seminary, and I went too, and I dropped out after a couple of years, but you sometime may need to see things from a different perspective to understand how to engage people in teaching that stuff. I would even suggest start including younger people than you in your music planning and message crafting, and find out what's reaching people younger than you. And for a lot of us worship guys, we're starting to get to the point where we've had our day, and in terms of maybe staying up with what's young and hip and everything. I would say too, and this is a challenging one. My father was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. My great-grandfather was a pastor. I've been in church for all my life, and I got to tell you, I have heard just a lot of boring sermons, and I've seen a lot of people just come right out and read and spend entire minutes quoting something out of some book, and I think that probably has a potential of coming off maybe inauthentic, and I know those were buzzwords way back when, but there's some truth to that. And I think one thing people want to see when you're planning a worship service is you speaking from your own life experience and being probably pretty honest about your own struggles, and then maybe even hearing that as you come here, I'm not perfect, and neither is our church, and you will be disappointed here from time to time. But our hope is that we get to work together to work through those when that does happen. I've already mentioned that start leveraging common experiences and emotions through those beginnings of your service, through whether they're through videos or which is a really easy one. Frankly, you can YouTube just about anything and find something just absolutely hilarious. And then here's another one too, just in terms of reaching unchurched people. This is going to sound really silly, but you could have the best planned service that's designed to reach people, but if your people aren't actually doing any reaching at all, then it's not going to go anywhere. And so there's got to be an effort to give people something to talk about. And honestly, I just had a conversation with a lady here in the last week whose father is on a deathbed, and she doesn't really even know how to address the question in her mind as to whether or not he's a believer, and it's within her own family, let alone somebody at work or some stranger. And I mean, it's sad. And so to expect our disciples who are followers of Jesus, who already attend our church, to be out there leading people through the sinner's prayer or through, evangelizing people and proclaiming the gospel to them is probably very uncomfortable. They want to have a reason to bring them to us in the churches, and then to believe and have confidence that we're going to do a good job of delivering something that isn't embarrassing to them, and something that's interesting. And so some of the obvious things too is, start having good quality music, start having good quality messages. Maybe as and I wrote some of the stuff down here. If people walk in your building and it's ugly or it smells like a basement, before you even play a song or before you even get to preach a word of any kind, they've already made this first impression that screams just nasty and irrelevant. And honestly, if you get someone to come into your building and that's the impression they get, it's already an uphill battle. And it's stuff like that it's maybe obvious, but we need to be aware of that kind of stuff.
I couldn't agree with you with that more, Joel. The fact of the matter is you only get one chance to make a first impression, and don't let nasty and irrelevant be that first impression. That's just dangerous. Now I know, Bill, I can see the wheels turning behind your glasses here. What's running through your mind as you're hearing some of this stuff?
Thanks, Jonathan and Joel. A number of things that you said. One that always hits me, especially in today's culture, because there is this tension there, and we hear it throughout of are you a missional church or are you a tractional church? And really the question kind of sets up a false answer. The reality is the church definitely needs to be sent or go, and it's also gathering, right? So you gather to go, and you go so that you can gather more. I'm reminded of John chapter 1, verse 51, I believe it is, where Nathaniel says, or Philip says to Nathaniel, I met the Messiah, and the one that we've all read about in the Old Testament, and he's from Nazareth. And Nathaniel says, what good can come from Nazareth? And Philip very succinctly says, come and see. And so there will always be this come and see sociological reality in us. And even there, you had a very learned man who knew about the Messiah from the Old Testament and said, I still think I can't just tell you, you've got to experience him. And so this experience of Jesus in worship with the body of believers, it needs to ring true. Now, the Word of God is going to be the truth bringer into that process, but we're a sacramental church body, right? And so we believe that the presence of Jesus lives in us, and we're going to be how people experience Jesus in worship. So it's not some distant portrayal of facts that takes place in worship, although that's part of it. It is also the body of believers who are brought up into the presence of Christ, but are still sinners who relate to the unchurched person who's there as well. So yeah, it's definitely this both and of engaging people so that you can send them out, and so that they feel comfortable in bringing and inviting that unchurched person. I loved your comment earlier. I actually tweeted that on time is the new currency, and so how does my 1.5 hour experience on a Sunday morning, what value is that going to bring to my unchurched friend? Is it going to bring him value, or is it not? I think it's a critical question you need to ask.
Well, and it may not bring them value and drawing them closer to a God they don't believe in the first place yet, but that's where we can start with real life issues of, some of those topical felt need type messages and stuff. Like, everybody has struggled with finances at some point. Everybody's had a tough time in marriage at some point. Everybody's having problems with their kids at some point. And there's not a single person who lives any semblance of a normal life that hasn't struggled with stuff. And you can begin to address those issues and then declare and believe and proclaim to the people there that you get this from the God who made us. And he's given this stuff to us, and for the gap that exists between what he's wanting for us and the fallen nature, therein lies Jesus Christ. And we can be absolutely confident then in sharing that with people, because it applies to everybody. Bill, as you were talking, I've worked at a church that had contemporary and traditional. I've been to the conferences and heard missional and attractional. And there's church services for the church people and all this talk about church for unchurched people. And what happens if we turn stuff like that into a tug of war is somebody's going to end up in the middle in the mud. And you've seen it at the fairgrounds. You've seen it. That's just what happens anytime you're in a tug of war. You get nasty blisters, and somebody ends up in the mud. And I read in, I think it was that Exponential Church book a while back, where we need to look at tensions as a bicycle crankshaft instead of a tug of war. And so you put energy into being missional, and then you put energy into being attractional. And when you're diligent in both, you make it up the hill. And I don't know about you, I probably wasn't the only person who ever just messed around on their bicycle and you tried pedaling with one foot. And you would go round and round and round and try to get up the hill, and you look stupid doing it, and you don't go very fast, and certainly can't get very far. And I believe in the church world, we get hung up in all these, debates back and forth rather than applying both sides of that coin.
Jonathan, or Joel, if I could too, I think what you said earlier, I think you said it kind of in passing, but I think it was very, very critical. If I'm willing to speak the language of the unchurched person, the person who doesn't know Jesus, the person who's not connected to the local church, they may very well know Jesus, but they don't like what his body looks like on earth. But to speak his or her language, I truly have to understand where they live, right? And I think at times we understand where they live, but we don't allow that language and those illustrations and those settings to be transferred or translated into the worship experience. And therefore, our intention is not to separate ourselves from them or separate Jesus from them, but in reality, de jure, that de facto, that is what ends up happening, is that there's a disconnect that's there. And I think if we simply understand we're here to be the bridge from heaven to earth. We are the sacramental presence of Christ for Jesus to have his way in the lives of those people. I think that helps. And I've been a Lutheran all my life. I've already said pastor, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. I was taught this quite a few years ago, but I believe it's actually, and I know there's other denominations here, but as a Lutheran, I'm going to speak from this perspective here. In our Reformation, Martin Luther made a point of putting the scriptures in the Bible in the language of the people, and that hasn't stopped. So it's not like he put it in German and now it's supposed to stay there, or he put it in, the blue hymn book and it's got to stay there. It continues to be evolved if you look at it in principle. And again, that's why I guess I come back to the principle of the matter is to be a Lutheran, to be a sacramental church, we're putting God incarnate through Jesus into the language of the people. It's Emmanuel. It is his name. It is just absolutely necessary in that.
And speaking to the language thing, I'm going to do a screen share here again, Jonathan, coming up here. I just, a couple of examples. Let me scroll through, find the one. There it is. All right. So in church, we might start out every Sunday with a "Let's stand and sing." And in our minds, in our dream come true church, with the lighting and the screaming band and the people totally engaged, this is what we're thinking, right? And you can see that, Jonathan. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got it loud and clear.
Okay. And the people are seeing that? I can't tell on the screen.
That's what we're feeding.
All right. So here's what we're thinking in our minds, but here's what they might be thinking. Like, stand and sing, what, like Village People? Are you kidding me? Like, who wants to do that? Or Glee, like that sounds like something on a TV show. And so, like, even at the beginning, before we've even gotten started, we've said a word that already, takes us way out of a game that's normal. Or how about this one? All right, now we're going to confess our sins. And we're thinking this, and they're thinking of that scary place where they got to tell some guy, their deepest, darkest, secret, and then walk out with all sorts of, things they're supposed to do. Or this one. This is my favorite. Take a look at what we say constantly in our sacramental churches. And put on the glasses that you've never heard this before, and you're not even sure about this guy Jesus. So you see, take and eat and drink his body and blood. And I got to tell you, to me, it starts looking like a zombie movie all of a sudden. We've got flesh eating happening right here in church. And I know that may seem really, really crass, but it's just a few quick examples of how easily we constantly throw out these words and these phrases. And my goodness, if we stopped to explain every last one of those, we would never get anywhere in church. On the other hand, we've got to be aware that every time we say something, we might be immediately excluding all these people that we said we were trying to reach in the first place.
Yeah, there is nothing more powerless, nothing that creates powerlessness more than not understanding what's going on. And you're right, we do have a real tendency to almost speak a foreign language as we engage people in church. Now, question coming in again. This is another phone number I don't recognize on my coming into a text message to me here. But you can put your questions in either on Twitter using the hashtag @52live or use the Google Q&A app here inside the Google Hangout here. What are some of the key points, Joel, that you would suggest occasionally the church explaining or unpacking in a worship service that is aimed at the unchurched?
Worship singing. I mean, so Scripture says, "Sing to the Lord a new song," and all the worship leaders can rattle off a couple psalms that tell us we should do that. But where else in the world do you do that kind of thing? And so one thing you might consider is explaining why you would do that. And I draw this kind of word picture. I love word pictures, and there's a bunch of ways of doing this. But to explain that worship singing is a way of, in a way, it's drawing a picture to give to your dad or your mom to put up on the refrigerator, and they may look at it and say, "What in the world is this?" But they don't care because it came from the children whom they love, and God is, we believe, the Father of all of us. We are children of God, and as believers, to give back to Him an expression of love and thanksgiving. I mean, it can be as simple as that. Hey, today it's an expression of love to this God we believe created us and saved us. And while you may not know Him yet, we invite you to just listen to the things that are happening. And then I'll tell you what, and here's a big thing: start getting your church engaged in the things and the places where you expect them to be participating. Because if you as the pastor or the worship leader get up with this just beautifully explained, invitation for people to come along with you, and they sit there, then the people who are supposed to be your best salesmen or women, they're not buying it. They're not buying it. And so now I'm sitting here as an observer, just checking this place out, and I heard you say come along, and none of your own people are coming along. And so you've got to train engagement in your own people. I would say explain singing. I think this idea of when we do sacraments, of explaining why it's important to have tangible elements for God that most people would believe are off far and away. And I've heard a lot of pastors do that really well. The confession of sins thing. I mean, the truth is we all know we've done things wrong, even people who, actually there may be people who don't believe that there's wrong. And so then you got to start there. Explaining offering. I mean, my goodness, you come to my house when we're trying to balance the checkbook and squeeze a tithe out, and I work at the church. And so now there's all these people putting money in a movie ticket or a concert ticket is nowhere near 10% of my income. You're out of your mind. And we just say this stuff and then pass these brass plates or these, with red felt at the bottom of them, and it's like, what are you people doing?
Hey, Joel, one of the things that I'm hearing that kind of runs through the common theme along those lines is that you really do need to do some work to understand where people are starting before you explain why the church does the things the church does. And then you kind of put where people are starting here, and you put what the church does right next to it, and let people make their own conclusions. Am I kind of hearing your thought process correctly?
Yeah, and you're going to have to lead them in closing the gap. But I think a lot of times, if we were on a relay race, we're on our third lap already, and they didn't even hear the gun go off. And it's like, I don't know, we do it constantly. Just try listening to some of the stuff that you say or your pastor says on Sunday, and pretend that instead of being in a Christian church, you're at the Hindu temple down the street, and all of a sudden, all these people start saying all this stuff at the same time, and nobody told you to sit down now, or whatever it is. I mean, it's like, what in the world is going on? It starts feeling creepy. Here's another thing too. I guess if for people in our church to help us, in our title it says, how do we plan services that reach unchurched people? I think a lot of the planning is just awareness and realizing what it is you're up against in the world out there, the competition for time, the attention span issue. Although people will sit through a slamming 3-hour movie and they'll fall asleep during a 7-minute sermonette thing. So it makes me think length in some respects and many times really has nothing to do with it, but it's how engaged am I, again, in what's being said. But the other thing, if you want people to reach people, there's something I came across here doing some work with communications, and I'm going to share my screen again, and this speaks, again, I'm sorry if I'm off on the planning thing, but this speaks to the reach factor of our sentence here. How do we plan services that reach people? You got to have the people who are out there talking to people, promoting your church and promoting Christ and what He's done for us. And so there's this net promoter score, and maybe a bunch of you have seen this before, but the only people that are going to reach people are those who rate your church at a 9 or a 10. And you see this on Home Depot surveys or Taco Bell surveys. How likely would you be to refer people to our church? And if they say a 7 or 8, they're like, they're kind of, indifferent. And that's crazy because that's a C or a B, which is, in many classes all I ever got. We're looking for 9s and 10s. We're looking for A's and A pluses in order for people to actually go out and talk about our church. And that's a steep curve. And so the follow-up question you'll always see on surveys is this: what would it take for us to earn your business, or what would we have to do in order for you to refer people to our church? And I got to tell you, on one hand, doing surveys at church scares me because you're never going to please everybody. But if we realize that our best promoters are the people who already come there, you can prepare and plan a great service with those things in mind. And if nobody says anything, then it's not going to go anywhere. And so you got to reach the people who are there, and have them become your seed sowers.
I love that, Joel, because you advocate a really basic strategy that is so often overlooked. Ask the people you're already in relationship with to invite other people. Ask people for help. I don't think it's a strategy we leave on the table all the time. Why is that one so hard for us to engage?
Well, you know what? The answers sometimes are really kind of scary. I asked and actually sometimes they're really easy though too. I asked my worship team last Thursday night in preparation for this, and I said, I asked them the question on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you be? And unfortunately, I was a little surprised by some of our answers, although I've only been here a year. I got answers that were really, really easy. So here's one. You want to start? Start telling people what you're going to do next week. Start telling people about your next message series. And Bill, I've seen it at Crosspoint all the time, and you guys are really creative, and you let people know. And at my previous church, every time we started a new series, there was an announcement or a video. We played a trailer oftentimes of what was coming next. And it's an easy thing to start doing, because then if you've identified a touch point of these life issues that a believer or an unbeliever alike experience together, and you let them know that they can expect that in 14 days, now they've got an easy date to invite somebody to, versus always wondering if this is going to be the money sermon, or is this going to be the body and blood sermon, or is this going to be the, something out there. Give them a landing pad and let them know where it is and when it's going to happen.
Awesome, great thoughts. What about advice you might have to offer worship planners in selecting music to connect with the unchurched? What are your best top 3, 4, 5 tips? Okay,
Bill, do you remember Easter of 2003, or it might have been 2004? I came to you. The band Evanescence had their top hit, like of all time, Bring Me to Life. And I said, Bill, I want to start Easter Sunday with Bring Me to Life. And you're like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, Bill, I promise you. And you're like, I don't know, And we talked for a while, and I'll never forget, Bill. Well, first of all, that moment when we played that song, and we had quality musicians and quality singers who could actually pull it off, and we added some theatrics and some stuff to it, and it was an amazing start. And we had people, we had gripped them, we had engaged them right there because they knew the song and loved it. Everybody loved that song, and we started church with that because of this phrase, "Bring me to life." And Bill, I remember you said to me, you said, "I will never question again the songs that you pick." It was such an empowering thing. And maybe pastors, a thing you might start doing is go out on a limb with your worship leaders and trust some suggestions. And then if it doesn't work, then obviously you got to bring that back. But that's an easy engagement thing, Jonathan and Bill, is by starting with the song they know. And most likely the song isn't going to necessarily provide the answer, but it can certainly set up the tension or the draw people in. And I looked back through old files, and Bill, I found 87 secular songs that I had written charts for during my 7 years there at Crosspoint. So that's not one a week. That's not even one every other week. But I remember just really enjoying looking for that thing that was out there on the radio now that would be somewhat relevant to what you were going to preach, Bill. And that's a fun one. It's an easy one, and it may be take it for granted. But man, if you don't do it, then you're missing out.
All right, Joel Wetzstein is the Director of Worship and Music at Brookfield Lutheran Church in Brookfield, Wisconsin. He's also connected to the 5.2 wikiConference coming up in Katy, Texas, September 23rd to the 25th. He is the production manager, so he will be putting his worship and arts coordination gifts to use in the main stage, getting the keynotes and the main stage events ready to go. So you'll see Joel around the 5.2 wikiConference. Be sure to tell him thanks for his good work today. Joel, appreciate you being here and sharing your giftedness with us and the network here at 5.2, challenging us to sharpen so that we can start to reach the lost, reach people that don't know Jesus yet. Way to go.
Thank you very much, guys. It was a privilege, and I look forward to seeing you guys in Katy back home at Crosspoint.
All right, that's coming up, of course, just under 5 weeks from now. Let's wrap up this month's all-network call with a final word from 5.2 founder Bill Woolsey.
Thanks, Jonathan. Joel, thank you very much. It really is always a pleasure to be with you. Your energy, your excitement, your passion for Jesus and for reaching his lost people, hey, that's what the partnership was, why it was so much fun as we served together in those opening years. I guess a couple of things just to wrap a bow on what you said for our audience. Speak the language. So you got to speak the language of the common person, as the person who doesn't know Jesus. Secondly, you said this in a variety of ways, but that is music speaks to the heart. So what is the heart language of the person you're trying to reach, and are you willing to speak that genre with them? And then the third thing I would add is I know a lot of our listening audience is saying, yeah, but I don't have a Joel and I don't have a fantastic band, or just because the resources are not there. Then I would just say we do have this thing called the internet. We do have worship videos, music videos. So there are a lot of ways that you can bring quality music into your worship experience without necessarily having that live. So again, just want to affirm what you're saying, and friends, you've heard me say this before, but I really think you have to ask the question, and you're going to have kind of two ways to fall on this one. Is Sunday morning a worship experience, and then you kind of think about how to involve the unchurched person, or is Sunday morning an evangelistic outreach experience, of which worship is a part of it? And I believe if you start where you start is going to define where you end up. Anyway, hey, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. I pray that the conversation here was as helpful to you as it was to me, and just reminding me of our calling as we are the sacramental presence of Jesus for this world. Look forward to seeing you in Katy, Texas in a few weeks. God bless.